We all experience grief. We all go through struggles in our life. We all experience sadness, adversities, and failures. But do you know that there are stages of grief? Elizabeth Kubler Ross introduced the concept of the 5 stages of grief in her 1969 book on death and dying. These stages are a framework to understand the emotional journey that people often go through when facing a significant loss, such as the death of a loved one, a terminal illness diagnosis, or other major life changes. While originally applied to the grieving process, these stages can also apply to various situations involving significant emotional distress. So, for example, someone who has received a diagnosis of a tumor or a leukemia or any other kind of cancer or some such terminal illness can go through these 5 stages. The first stage is the stage of denial. Denial is the initial stage where individuals refuse to accept the reality of the situation. This stage serves as a defense mechanism that buffers the immediate shock of the loss, allowing the person to slowly process the information. For example, someone who has just been diagnosed with a serious illness like cancer might initially react by denying the diagnosis, insisting that the doctor must be wrong or there are some other mistakes which have happened. This stage can also be seen in someone who has lost a loved one but continues to act as though nothing has changed, perhaps even expecting the person to walk through the door. The second stage is anger. As the protective effects of denial begin to fade away, the pain re-emerges and the individual may redirect it through anger. This anger can be directed at various targets, including themselves, others, or even the person or situation causing the grief. For example, a person who is grieving the loss of a loved one might feel intense anger towards the deceased for leaving them, or they might become irritable and lash out at friends or family members. In the case of a terminal illness, for example, a patient who has been diagnosed with a tumor or any such thing and who is going to die, the individual might feel anger towards the healthcare system, the doctors, God, or even themselves for getting sick. The third stage is bargaining. What is bargaining? In the bargaining stage, individuals attempt to regain control by making deals or promises, often to a higher power, often to God, in hopes of reversing or mitigating the loss. It's a way to postpone the inevitable by imagining what if scenarios. For example, after a diagnosis of terminal illness, a person might pray or promise to lead a better life if they could just have more time. In the context of a breakup or divorce or a loss of loved one, an individual might try to bargain with God, offering to change their behaviors or conditions to save their relationships. The fourth stage is depression. Depression is the stage where the reality of the loss truly sinks in, leading to deep sadness. It's a period of mourning for the loss and the life that was, and will no longer be, due to this change. After realizing that a loved one is truly gone, an individual might withdraw from social activities, experience feelings of hopelessness, or struggle with daily functioning. In cases of job loss, someone might feel a profound sense of worthlessness or despair, wondering what they'll do next. In the case of a terminal illness diagnosis, the person who has the terminal illness might go into depression and feel hopeless about his or her situation after he realizes that death is inevitable. And the final stage is acceptance. Acceptance is the stage where individuals come to terms with their reality of their situation. It doesn't mean that they are okay with the loss, but they have reached a point where they can acknowledge it and start to move forward. After grieving a loss, a person may begin to find ways to live with the new reality, like establishing new routines or finding a sense of peace with the situation. In the case of a terminal illness, acceptance might involve making preparations for the end of life, finding ways to cherish remaining time, or reconciling with loved ones. How is this applied in real life? It can be used to cope with the death. The stages of grief are most commonly associated with coping with the death of a loved one. For example, after the sudden death of a spouse, the surviving partner might cycle through these stages from initially refusing to believe in the death occurred to feeling intense anger to eventually accepting the loss and finding ways to live with their partner. People facing a terminal or life altering diagnosis often go through these stages. A cancer patient might initially deny the severity of their condition, feel anger at the unfairness of the situation, try to bargain for more time, fall into depression when realizing the situation's gravity, and finally reach a place of acceptance where they can focus on quality of life. It is also used in divorce or breakup. The end of a significant relationship can trigger the stages of grief. After a breakup, the person might first deny that relationship is over, feel angry at the partner or themselves, bargain for a second chance, experience deep sadness, and eventually accept the end of the relationship, allowing them to heal and to move on. However, there are important considerations here. It's important to understand that these stages are not necessarily experienced in a linear fashion. People may move back and forth between stages or experience multiple stages at once. Not everybody experiences all the five stages, and the duration and intensity of each stage can vary significantly from person to person. While Kubler-Ross initially developed these stages in the context of death and dying, they have been widely applied to other forms of loss and change. Kubler Ross model helps individuals recognize and validate their feelings during times of loss and change, providing a pathway to healing by understanding that these emotional responses are natural and part of human experience. Thank you so much for listening.